Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to this YouTube series in which I'll explain the ins and outs of being an IGL in Valorant. In this series we'll discuss many different topics regarding just being an IGL and, well, the team environment in general. So, if you're gonna be interested in this series, make sure to drop a like below and hit the subscribe button. And if you have any suggestions or topics that you want me to discuss, make sure to leave them in the comments as well. So, let's get right into the video. Last video we talked about styles and their importance in the general job of the IGL. So compositions and style are often closely connected, as some compositions are able to facilitate certain styles. But before we can even start thinking about the compositions we want to use, we need to determine what roles there are in the game and what roles my teammates have, so we can then create a well-rounded composition that is comfortable for all players. So to start, well, there are many different roles. Generally speaking, you have development roles, which are obviously like controller, sentinel, initiator, duelist, those 4 roles. But you also actually have CSGO roles, which are the IGL role, op role, support, lurker, and entry. And the IGL obviously being the in-game leader, the op being the player that, well, primarily picks up the op, or in this game the operator. The support who is throwing the most utility to allow his teammates to get kills. The lurker is the player who primarily flanks. And finally, the entry is the player that, well, primarily goes into the site first to take space. So from my perspective, Valorant and CSGO are actually the 2 games that are fundamentally very similar. And, well, therefore we should take the best of both worlds. And in my opinion, it can be beneficial to appoint every one of these roles to your players. That being said, there's also actually a big difference, between those 2 type of roles, because most of the times you want someone that is best at one of the Valorant roles, but at the same time can fulfill 2 or more of the CSGO roles. Well, so for example, you want the Valorant player to be, well, extremely good at playing different duelists, but he doesn't per se have to be really good at being a controller. So you can have a really good Jet, but you're not going to be expecting him to play, for example, Astra or Omen, or all that stuff. And then as for the other role, you want him to be the entry player, well, because he's the duelist. He's, for example, the Jet, who can dash into the side. But at the same time, you don't want to restrict this player by only letting him entry. So if he finds a gap in the defense somewhere, he might just turn into the lurker. Because you don't want to restrict this player, this duelist Jet, by not allowing him to flank, for example, by only allowing him to just entry, basically, only getting into the sides, which might, well, in his head, he might think like, okay, I can't go for this play because, well, I'm gonna have to entry on the side. You don't want that to happen. So that's why you want one player to be able to fulfill multiple roles, at least 2. And another example, if the duelist, for example, dies, generally speaking, like a KO player is the support player, I would say. And if the duelist dies, well, then the KO player has to switch from being a support to an entry player. So basically, every player needs to be able to play every CSGO role, but also have one of these 5 roles as their main role. So generally, the sentinels and controllers will be the lurkers, initiators and controllers will be the support or entry, and duelists will be the entry or opper. So obviously, a controller can also be turned into an entry, because, you know, if the controller has no smokes or utility left, it's best if he goes first, because he will just not be really useful for the next or the rest of the round. For example, like Astra, let's say, I don't know, we're executing A, and I'm just placing all these stars where I, like, I don't know, fucking, let's say I just have 3 stars just for this, and I'll just use smoke.
Without a star, I cannot. Obscuring concealment, pulling them in.
I won't have any stars left, but I'm on the execute. But now, because I don't have any stars left, I only have 3 stars, I'm just gonna go first, because I'm extremely useless, especially as an Astra, because I won't have any stars left. I'll basically just be a player with a gun. So in those cases, you do want to go first and be the entry. So once again, you can turn from a controller into an entry. As for the role of the IGL, there is no one way or one agent that is absolutely the best for the IGL. It just really depends on the style you want to play and on what kind of teammates you have. So you want to take a look at what your individual strengths are as an IGL and what kind of weaknesses your team might have. So the way to choose the best role for an IGL is just best explained by using examples. So, for example, if you have insane aim as an IGL and your team just lacks taking initiative, maybe a duelist role will just be perfect for you. And similarly, If you have a great clutch ability and you're a great individual player, but you're just a bit less aggressive, and the team just takes initiative like it should be, or you just have a great duelist in your team already, then maybe you might want to play a controller. Because a controller will just often be the last person to die because he will just have to smoke and he will always be the most useful person for the execute. Personally, I like playing an agent like KO. I'll be honest, my aim is just not the best, but I want to take space together with my team and I want to take initiative. So I'll still be able to support my team with my flashes and other utility, but my agent is just not important enough to stay alive as long as possible, like maybe as opposed to a controller. Also, different Valorant rules have different advantages. So when playing a controller, you can kind of decide what and where you will smoke in a split second, which can just lead to quick adaptations and you determining the entire execute even, or just push. And on the other hand, an agent like KO allows you to quickly take space somewhere if needed, and it allows you to make more aggressive and coordinated plays. And the only thing is that you'll just have to ask for smokes now. Generally speaking, I would say that something like a controller is just more focused on the macro play of the entire round, where you're just basically controlling the entire play of your team. For example, if you're playing an Astra, you can basically smoke everywhere you want, right? But you probably won't be the guy that's just getting in there and just getting the info, getting figuring out what the enemy is doing. You're just going to be the guy that's going to be smoking, maybe trading, stuff like that. But you're not really going to be aggressor. Whereas KO is, I would still say you can always be micro as an or macro as an IGL, right? You're always watching what your teammates are doing. You can always just ask like, okay, let's say I would play B as a KO on a Ascent. I can still ask my Astra on A, can you guys take A main with like a smoke and a pull, and they can do it with like let's say a Jet and an Astra together, something like that. So it's still possible. I would just say as an Astra it's a bit easier, but whereas in KO, if you want to like do something, for example, okay, let's take B main right now. It's kind of just harder if you're not there as an IGL because generally speaking, teammates won't really know what to do to take those sides unless, well, maybe you discuss it, which you should do. You should discuss how to take A main, B main, so everyone is on the same page. But sometimes, especially when calling a bit more looser, it's going to be a bit harder, and there are always going to be like these different differences or just differences in general that will occur in the round, which allow or which require different play. And that's why I like KO, because I can just flash myself in, get the info that I want, rather than having my teammates get the info for me. That's why I like KO. So, in my opinion, playing either a controller or initiator is actually the best option as an IGL because, well, you'll just be able to determine the pace of the game with both roles, and which each of these roles having their own advantages, as we just discussed. And then, as for Sentinel, because we didn't discuss that one yet, in my opinion, he's just a bit like too stationary and generally too focused on holding a site. And as an IGL, I'm speaking from my experience as well as playing a Sentinel. You'll just be looking at your minimap for like 30% of the rounds, maybe 20%. I'm not sure. I've never kept track of it. So, meaning that if the opponents just rush your site while you're just looking at the minimap or just calling or whatever you're doing your IGL stuff, you might just lose the site easier because you're not paying attention. And that's why I personally always want like a dedicated Sentinel or at least site anchor in my team. But it's obviously still possible to play Sentinel as an IGR role. It's not a bad thing, but you just need to understand its restrictions. Same with a controller and an initiator. Every agent has a restriction, and you'll just only find out whether a role fits you by trying it out. Lastly, you want to determine the roles of your teammates. So during your tryouts, you should look at the qualities of your teammates. Then, after understanding their qualities, you can just start assigning them roles. And as mentioned before, someone that is, for example, really good in clutches and is just a smart player, a good individual player with good aim, you probably want him to be on the controller role because he'll stay alive the longest. And if you have the same aimer and aggressive player, you probably want to put him on the duelist role or a chamber, obviously. But chamber is a duelist, so if a player is also more reserved and he just likes flanking or just holding down sides, then probably the Sentinel or controller role might just be best suited for him. Generally speaking, you want him on the Sentinel, but obviously with this meta where you kind of have like, I would even say your main duelist, your main star player, you're probably going to have him on Chamber. Or at least that's definitely an option that a lot of teams consider or are considering or are even playing right now. So, generally speaking, you want a flanker on the Sentinel, but you can also put him on a controller if he's comfortable, obviously. And you plan on having your main star player on like something like a chamber. And also, lastly, if you have like a reliable player with just all-round great capabilities, then he'll probably best be suited for the initiator role. That being said, roles can just always change. You might want to try out different people in different roles, but just make sure that you and IGL are just always comfortable in the role you're playing. Maybe you're a true flex, and you're just able to find your way around every agent and role, so you want to adapt to your team's strengths, and then that's completely fine as well. But just make sure that when you're looking for teammates, that you can find people that are specialized in the roles that you're looking for, because, well, this will just benefit the overall synergy of the team. So, to summarize, we discussed the nitty-gritty of roles, and we talked about what kind of roles there are, and what the difference and importance is of both having a Valorant role, so the Initiator, Sentinel, or Controller and Duelist role, and also a CSGO role, which are obviously the Entry, Lurker, Op, IGL, and Support role. So, finally, we also discussed how to choose a role as an IGL, and how to assign these different roles to your teammates, and what kind of qualities each role can require, doesn't have to. So, in the next video, we'll discuss compositions. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it interesting, make sure to drop a like below and hit the subscribe button. If you have any suggestions or topics that you want me to discuss, make sure to drop them in the comments as well. And I would love you guys. Thank you so much for fucking watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in next videos. Bye. Peace out.